Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to my honourable colleague who spoke before me. Today, first of all, I rise to offer a sub-amendment for the amendment the government just presented to Bill 1. To start with, I wish to be clear. The Alberta Sovereignty within the United Canada Act, Bill number 1, is a bill that I personally support, as do most Albertans and many, many of the good folks of Cypress Medicine Hat. Now, Madam Chair, this is a relatively simple and straightforward sub-amendment to the government's amendment, and it is designed to clear up some of the public misconceptions regarding this proposed legislation and some of the legitimate concerns. Allow me first to preface my remarks by reminding this Assembly that my support for strengthening Alberta's autonomy is absolute. I was proud to serve on the government's Fair Deal panel starting in 2019. And Madam Chair, when I felt that the panel's recommendations didn't go far enough to reflect the public concerns, I publicly offered additional recommendations directly to the Premier to enhance Alberta's autonomy and to make Alberta the freest and most prosperous place. I will also remind everyone here that I personally campaigned on the winning side of the equalization referendum, even when some UCP members withheld or were quiet with their support. Madam Chair, I then brought forward Motion 505, which was adopted by this Assembly, unanimously I believe, calling on the government to, and I quote, deploy every legal, economic and constitutional tool at the province's disposal to win a fair deal for Alberta and, of course, Alberta families. And in addition, in the past 6 months, I personally supported and publicly argued in favor of a proposed Sovereignty Act in interviews with national media, including the CBC. My support for strengthening Alberta's autonomy has never wavered, even when some members of our current cabinet attempted to play politics with this issue. The bottom line, Madam Chair, is I want Bill 1 to be approved by this Assembly. But more importantly, I want this legislation to work for Albertans. And for that to happen, Bill 1, Alberta's sovereignty within a United Canada Act, needs to be widely accepted and deeply supported by the public. This will ensure that it remains in place no matter which party forms government in the future. With all of that being said, by far the most common concern I've heard about Bill 1 is that it will grant Cabinet too much power to unilaterally alter existing legislation. Too much power in the hands of Cabinet. While this concern may be inconvenient for the government, the fact is this concern is not limited to just supporters of the official opposition. In fact, I have repeatedly heard this concern from voters that I would personally describe as lifelong conservatives. And given the events of the past 3 years, this should not come as a surprise to anyone. Conservatives, more than any other group of Albertans, have grave concerns about the centralization of power by government within our democratic system. To its credit, this current government is committed to limiting government overreach in a number of areas. However, when it comes to this bill, so far the message has been muddled. The government has claimed that under Bill 1, no legislative changes can be made without clear direction being given by the Assembly. That is technically true, but the fact is, when it comes to raising the bar on proper democratic representation, we can do much better, and much better than the amendment the government just presented, which is why I presented a sub-amendment. My sub-amendment is designed to ensure that any legislative changes proposed by Cabinet, even when they are made at the Assembly's request, must ultimately be ratified again by the Assembly with a majority vote. And by making this one small change, I believe we can put to rest the largest concern that most nonpartisan Albertans have about this legislation. Not only does this clear the air on some rather muddled messaging, but it will also significantly strengthen this legislation. And ultimately, the purpose of the bill is to make a strong statement to Albertans, to the federal government, to Ottawa, and to all Canadians that Alberta is done with being pushed around. So I ask you, my fellow members of the Assembly, what ultimately makes a stronger statement? An order delivered by Cabinet following a closed-door meeting, or the democratically expressed wishes of the people's representatives delivered in this chamber for the whole world to see? For the whole world to see. Madam Chair, democracy doesn't matter less when you're dealing with difficult issues like Alberta's autonomy. In fact, it matters more. So let's give the public more democracy. Let's accept my sub-amendment to the government's amendment, and let's continue to fight for Alberta families and making Alberta the free and most prosperous place. Madam Chair and colleagues, my concern with the government amendment is it left two key areas out of where, for ratification, for actually using the Sovereignty Act, Cabinet does not have to come back to the legislature for a majority vote, a majority ratification. So my sub-amendment in it's of course 4, section A, 1, and then for 1.1 states that a minister may not make an order under subsection 1A until each of the following occurs in successive order. The minister tables a copy of the order as proposed in the Legislative Assembly within 7 calendar days of the tabling made under Clause A. The Legislative Assembly approves a resolution that confirms that the proposed order is consistent with the resolution approved under Section 3 to which it relates. The Lieutenant Governor Council approves the making of the proposed order. So the minister has oversight when it comes to implementation of the Sovereignty Act from the 87 representatives of Alberta. And Section 4A, subsection 1, 1.2, the Lieutenant Governor Council may not make an order under subsection 1 to direct a minister under Clause B or issue a directive under Clause C until each of the following occurs in successive order. Again, a member of Executive Council tables a copy of the order as proposed to this legislature, to the 87 of us, within 7 calendar days, and that's in 1.2b, and we had our opportunity to ratify it. That one, Madam Chair, I feel is especially important because a directive to one of Alberta's agencies, when it comes to the Sovereignty Act, needs the eyes and the oversight of the 87 elected MLAs who are tasked with speaking on behalf of Albertans. A ministerial directive to ATB, to AIMCO, to Alberta Petroleum, to AFSC. Madam Chair, I feel that's essential, that under the Sovereignty Act, that comes back to this legislature for all the eyes of Albertans to have their final say on it before it's approved. So, Madam Chair, in closing, I will just resubmit. I have been a consistent, steady supporter of Alberta being the freest and most prosperous place within Canada. To do that, we have to strive for a fair deal. Nothing moves unless it's pushed. The Sovereignty Act the Alberta Sovereignty Act within United Canada is a mechanism and a step towards that. But let's enhance democracy. Let's shine sunlight on this for all Albertans. get behind this law and make it as strong as possible for years going forward. Thank you all. Thank you, Madam Chair.